dokie. So welcome everyone to our contributor strategy meeting. We have a few things to discuss today. And the first is the schedule regarding the holidays. So seems like the mentoring group will meet next week. And then contributor growth will be canceled. And then governance is the question I think that needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
That's the Josh thing, right?
Yeah, Josh and I are kind of the two people who generally do that. I can do it on the 5th. I'll sync up with Josh and we'll make a decision on that, and I'll drop it in the notes.
Okay, cool. And then the first note here, and I don't want to butcher that name, but wants to talk about women in the CNCF. So is that person present?
Hi. Yes.
Oh, okay. So Fasila. Okay, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your idea and what you would like to discuss?
Yeah, so myself and Iris is also in the call. So we wanted to do research on basically women in open source, but both of us are working with Istio. So we thought maybe we can specifically do the research on CNCF projects. So we would like to understand how many women are there in the CNCF projects, and would like to get some interviews or surveys done and see if they are facing any pain points and or anything like that, and then see how to bring in more women contributors to CNCF, not just to the usual roles they do, but more into the technology roles specifically, if possible. We would like to understand if there are any concerns, or is there anything which we can do to improve their contributor experience and welcome more women to the community.
I think that sounds like an amazing idea. So definitely something I would say right on that we would like to see. Do you have any concrete ideas that you would like to?
If we just thought of proposing this today, we do have a plan in mind. Like we would like to host some surveys if possible. Maybe we can come back with a set of questions, whatever we have in mind, and probably get it reviewed by all of you to make sure things are in the right direction. And if we get the responses from the surveys or face-to-face interviews, we have a design thinking based approach in mind to analyze the results and find out possible solutions or out of that design thinking approach.
Okay, sounds like you do have a plan, which is great. Dawn, so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we just don't know how to do it in the CNCF way, but we have a plan in mind. Would like to know like who can support us with the surveys or to host the surveys and review whatever we are doing and guide us in the process.
So I think probably, and then Dawn, and I see Josh is there as well, like the best approach is to use the contributor growth working group for that framework, like come up with the survey and kind of that's where you can go and join and then ask for feedback, right? Generally, the way this works is like you run your own thing, you kind of do it, and then you propose something and get feedback during these working groups. Am I right, Dawn, Josh, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, they can just do it on their own. They don't have to do it with a contributor growth working group.
Yeah, but to get feedback, I mean.
They can, right? Yeah. Particularly because there's going to be another contributor growth meeting before the next general meeting. So the one of the things I was actually going to say though about this is I would suggest also trying to set up and do individual interviews and not wait to complete the survey stage.
Okay.
As we just proved with our recent general CNCF contributor survey, getting qualified responses for a survey is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get people's attention. It's hard to get them to complete the survey. We had a 50% completion rate.
Mhm.
And so I think you want to have a second route to collect data
Qualitative
in
data.
case the survey is a dud, honestly.
Yes, we were
Um,
planning to do the survey as well as, if possible, some
Yeah.
face-to-face interviews as well.
Yeah.
We already have 2 to 3 women here in the meeting, and similarly, if you guys can suggest some other people, we know people from Istio and some of the projects. So basically, we can just grow that data set and then have interviews. Are you saying only do face-to-face interviews and no surveys at all, or
No,
just
go ahead and do the survey. It's not a
okay?
lot of effort, and if it collects data, it collects data. I'm just saying that you may discover that collecting data via survey is less
Yeah.
fruitful
Got it.
than you would necessarily think.
Usually the surveys, if we have to do, will it be hosted by CNCF and we give the questions, and or
Yeah.
what is the platform which can be used? Okay, CNCF will host this.
Yeah, so CNCF has SurveyMonkey,
Okay.
and we can get this as an official CNCF survey. We can set that up.
Okay.
So that said, that's not required, is it? So is your effort associated with a research institution?
No, we are just doing it on,
Okay.
we both are from different organizations.
Okay.
I'm working with Ericsson and Iris is with Intel, but we both work together in Istio, so we just came
Okay.
up with this idea on our own. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so then I guess just setting it up as an official CNCF survey is the way to go, and that way people know that it's, not some kind of a scam effort. Yeah, and that's not hard. Coming up with the questions is going to be hard.
Sure. Okay, so we come
and
up with the
targeting respondees.
question for the next month's meeting, or is it okay once we have the questions, we post it in the tag Slack channel and then get the feedback? Okay.
Oh yeah, no. Let's work on this asynchronously. Let's not wait for a meeting.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so generally the way we start these is people write out the questions in a doc, in a Google Doc or HackMD doc.
Okay.
And that way other people can mark it up and add comments and suggestions and everything else.
Yeah, got it. Is there any specific folder where we have to create this, or we just create it in our own? Yeah. Okay, got it.
Just go ahead and create it in your own. Yeah.
Okay, then we have the way forward, and we'll get back to you soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think Josh mentioned that, but it's like, so one of the benefits of this group is that we can try to connect you for the interviews, the one-on-ones, like we can, this is probably the right kind of group to try. There is no guarantee because it's always difficult, especially if you're like looking for women specifically, because that is like the pool is smaller, but like kind of try to help connect you, maybe someone knows someone and so on, so you can get those qualified interviews.
Yeah, that would really help. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have Kim's new idea I'm really excited about. I'm just going to share it and then let you talk about it.
Okay, and Catherine, I was wondering if this should be you and I. I mean, it wasn't, you and I were talking about it. I don't know if I want to take all the, I guess if it fails, I'll take all the credit. And if it works, we'll share it. Thank you. So I know many of you on the call, and you know that I've always been beating the drum that marketing and visibility is important, and that we need to recognize that it's an important part of any project or company, et cetera. It's not all about the technology. So I was talking with Catherine about this idea on how we can, well, it first started when I was with Nirmata, I have since left Nirmata and the Caverno project, how I was working with our founders and trying to help them understand that within the Caverno project that potentially there should be maintainers that are not just code maintainers, that there are other things that are very important to a project that, that are very important to a project that helps it succeed. So I did a bunch of research I talked with Chris Anchek and Amy via email. I did a bunch of research and I found these resources, the project ladder, the maintainers circle page, the project health page, and they all talk about non-code contributions, but they can be somewhat ambiguous. They don't really go into specifically that if you are the lead marketing person for a project doing the events and the messaging and branding, then that's an important position and you can move up on the project ladder, for example. And then as I was talking with Amy about this at QCon, she says, the maintainers of a lot of projects look at maintainers as a capital M, like a maintainer of the code, when really it should be a little m. It's a maintainer of a project for all the things that a project needs. So if we go to the next slide, Chris pointed out to me the Helm project, and the Helm project has successfully looked at 2 levels of maintainer. And if we back on the previous slide, I guess what Catherine and I talked about is that there's 2 ladders that go up into a maintainer status, code and non-code. And going to the next slide, the Helm project did effectively do that with looking at what they call Helm org maintainers, of which Karen Chu was the first organizational maintainer, and then project maintainers. And they split this to recognize the importance of both types of contributions to a project, but without giving, basically how I look at it, without giving a marketing person responsibility to approve anything on the project, on the code related side, which 1, I wouldn't want, and 2, I could understand that being kind of a concern. So if we go to the next one, and then the second example is a contributor ladder. And the contributor ladder does a good job of at the very low beginning level, the community level, talking about non-contribution participation. But once you get up in the higher levels, the organization, reviewer, maintainer levels, it's left very ambiguous on other clearly defined project components. And if you even look at the community participant, I kind of threw a little arrow in there to do our other examples of non-code contribution participation. So the contributor ladder is very well done. I don't know who did it or who was participating. They either got tired when they got to non-code contributions, or just maybe there wasn't somebody like that on the team to help advise on the non-code contributions that are important in a project. And so my ask for you all, and then I'll let you ask questions, is support from this group to create I guess a sub-project to help us update this guidance, documentation guidance for, as Catherine named this, I love this, the guide to contributor role definition for open source projects, to use the contributor ladder as a starting point, do some, interview the community and add, my knowledge as well on what are non-code contributions, the importance they are in the project, and how a non-code contributor can reach that maintainer type status, and then produce that documentation, share it out with projects as an alternative for the different open source projects to consider implementing for their project. Catherine, did I miss anything?
No, I think that was everything we discussed. So
okay.
Yeah, personally, I love this idea, and it's something I actually had a conversation with a project about. It might have been Captain, it might have been a different project, I don't remember. But this project that I was talking to wanted to have some maintainers who are more on the community management side, and they were looking at the contributor ladder, which kind of has some of that, but maybe not quite enough. And so I think that this would help fill the gap for some of the projects. And so I really like the idea of updating the contributor ladder template. along with the documentation that goes along with it. And I do like this idea of creating a guide to contributor roles that includes all of the various types of roles, because I think it's sometimes hard for people to visualize all of the different things that they can do in open source projects and the different roles that some of these projects might need. So I think this is an excellent idea. I love it.
Thank you.
I also really like it. I know we did some of this work a while back in Kubernetes, and it never made its way back into the general CNCF ecosystem for all the projects to take part in. And I'd been pushing for a while on trying to revamp that project in the Kubernetes environment and try and push it from there, once it was redone, back to the CNCF into the tag atmosphere, into the circle of the tag. And I think maybe pushing it from the other direction and trying to do the work here in the tag first and then trying to push it back to the individual projects. I think it might give us more momentum than we were getting in the other direction. So thumbs up on that.
Thank you, Noah. And no, I didn't, in my research, I saw some of the Kubernetes stuff, but I didn't find anything that was significantly different than what I found from the CNCF level. So if you have those links, that would be really helpful. Assuming that yeah. And if I may piggyback on what you said, when I was exploring this with Chris, before I talked with Catherine, that's what he said is, the best place to take this is through this tag group, this kind of idea. See if they like the idea. If they like the idea, then you can, I guess Catherine said it's a sub project or I don't remember what you called it within this tag, Catherine.
It's just it would be a project off the tag, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Everything is a project.
I mean, this definitely would be under contributor growth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
non-code but growth. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, like, of course, as you can imagine, the reason why it resonates with me as well is because I'm not like a technologist, right? And I do really enjoy being part of the community and working with everyone. And it's like, I feel like, yeah, so it kind of resonates that people, because I feel like I do provide value, right? So it's like, I feel like people like me and like him, there should be a path for them as well to get, like, when they're doing that for a particular project or so. But one of the things that I think that's important is, like, once we have that, what I would wish that the CNCF could help then is, because one thing, like, we all know, like, once we have those guides somewhere online, it's like, great, it's online. So what, right? Now people have to read it, people have to, so I feel like I'm hoping, and something that I would like, because Chris mentioned that was, or like it resonated with him and he thinks it's important, is like, once we have the guide, kind of like pushing that out and hopefully get the support from the CNCF to kind of really promote that vision, because we have that misconception that it's only code that matters really to and I know that we've all had these conversations, it's not the case, but still that perception remains, and not only among contributors, but also among projects, right? A lot of projects think that's the case.
Yeah, and saying it on a stage is great, but unless you have the formal document to point to, it doesn't have that strength.
The other thing is, honestly, for a lot of projects where currently the leadership are 100% code contributors, they could just really use help with a framework for deciding when somebody's non-code contributions are significant, right? Because like sometimes one of the reasons you get pushback, and I had this whole conversation with some contributors, is that you said, for recognizing non-code contributors, et cetera, was they thought I was asking them to make somebody a maintainer just because that person ran a meetup.
Right.
And I'm like, no. I'm talking about like making somebody a maintainer because that person is doing project management for the entire project. And they're like, oh, and so giving them sort of, guidelines that they could follow, that they could include in their own contributor ladders, to judge. Because I mean, the nice thing about code contributions, right, is you can look at GitHub stats, and have some guideline in measuring the magnitude of those. Non-code contributions are often a lot more qualitative, and sometimes impossible to see out of the stats, and so it's harder for project leaders to necessarily judge when they're significant or not.
Yeah, and that's what I was noticing. It's the ambiguity. It's just ambiguous. Like they talk about the importance of it, but there's not a lot of detail. And if you are a technical leader, I mean, I've worked with technical leaders my entire career. If you're a technical leader, you just don't think of, you just can't envision what that side is. Just like I have to learn, I need to learn Python for a job I'm going for, and I'm like, I just don't even want to, or even know where to start. So, we're coming from two different sides.
One of the questions I have every time I think about no contributors and that other side of contribution that is not related to code, I keep going back to questioning myself of what is the root cause of that? Is that some failure or some is that maybe is that a platform that is missing for things that are not code related? Because right now everything is pretty much in GitHub, and you do everything in a more like code environment. So I don't know. What do you think is the root cause of not having that incentive and not having the recognition in the first place? Do you think it is a platform that is missing, similar to GitHub, but for other types of contribution that gathers the community that is not related to code together and have, because for example, like Josh said, if you're doing something in GitHub, you already have everything in there for you to actually see if someone is contributing. So you have the what you would call some KPIs, so you can just go and see like the commits, and you can see additions to the code and whatnot. But for everything that is not code related, we don't have that platform with those like those stats gathered, so you can just have community and have like something to show. So what do you think is the problem here?
So there's some extent to which it's solvable and some extent to which it's not, right? Like one of the things we did in Kubernetes is all of our non-code activities are tracked using documents in GitHub. And so that means in an aggregate volume, anybody who's doing a lot of non-code stuff is going to actually show up in the GitHub stats. And that's something that we have recommended to other projects, because that also has another benefit, right? Which is you now have a document in GitHub that someone else can pick up to do that thing again. But that's only a partial solution, right? Because I was actually just dealing with another project, the departure of a key contributor who doesn't show up in the stats at all. And the reason why she didn't show up in the stats is her main job in the project. One of her key roles in the project was to basically pester everybody about Slack to get their final PR reviews in before release. And there really is no reasonable way to capture that kind of activity, which can be extremely vital for a project, right? And you usually find out after the person leaves how important it was. So it's always just going to be important to say, hey, there's going to be types of activity, particularly non-code activity. I mean, for that matter, honestly, even code stats can be extremely deceptive, right? Everybody knows the story of a one-line patch that actually required, 160 review comments in order to figure out what that one line had to be. So there's always going to be certain qualitative contributions that don't show up in statistics. So it's sort of twofold, right? One is use GitHub for things more than code, right? Because not only does it help you measure stuff, but it also then provides a documentation track record for your own community. And then the second part is embrace the idea that there is a certain, important set of contributions that are never going to be easily measurable.
So, Josh, if if I may, because though Alexander, did I say your name correctly? Alexander? Okay. So two things. One, I agree with, definitely agree with John that even if it's a marketing or community function, you can be using GitHub to be documenting your meetup or getting your blog published or whatever. I mean, Kubernetes does that right now, right? That all the blogs go through GitHub. And so you can see contributions that way. But one of the root causes is lack of guidance within the current materials, within the current contribution ladder, the maintainers, the GitHub documentation on best practices for a project. So it's lacking within that, is that so that projects can envision non-code contributions and what kinds of things they can be. And then as Josh said, the second thing is that we don't use GitHub for everything that's marketing related. And then the third thing is, Josh, you made a good point about Slack. So I guess the question would be, going back to Lucas and CNCF, and could DevStats be picking up Slack? I mean, can we ask for it? Can't. Oh, okay. You've already asked that question. Okay.
I've already tried to implement it. The problem is the Slack API is undocumented, proprietary, and they make changes to it all the time without notifying anyone.
Okay. Okay. So then we just, I guess as part of this project, I think the good thing to note, and I can put that note in there, I have it here, is that there's probably some things that we would either not be able to recognize or we'd have to manually calculate to recognize.
I also have another theory, which is probably the hardest. And I think open source projects are created by technologists, and they are, of course, biased towards their own work, right? So I think there is and to get started, it's just the tech, right? The code, that's the most important thing. And so I think everyone is biased towards their own, ability, and say that that's really important because how much goes into it. And we also know how developers think about marketing roles and things like that. So I think there is a perception problem. So one thing, yes, guidance, but that's easy to make, right? Relatively easy. You do that, you do the documentation, help kind of define those roles to help people define them for their own project. But how do you overcome? And that's where I think the CNCF would be key to help, because if you have something and it's online, and even if people know about it, but if they don't really believe that it is critical, it won't change, right? It's really kind of hammering it home, right? That it is important, why it's important, why do you need it, and just to overcome that and kind of is changing attitudes towards certain things, I think. And maybe I'm seeing it overly pessimistic, or it's not pessimistic, but maybe we have some technologists here, like you, or most of them, most of you are. Maybe you think it's different, but that's how I kind of think, or a problem that I think that is.
Well, and Catherine, we talked about that. So there is a slide. If we like this idea, there was a slide where you and I brainstormed on how this would roll out and what kind of documentation that we need to prepare, as well as like an awareness campaign and how getting CNCF behind it. So I guess to piggyback on what you said, it's important, if we get approval and once we get the materials put together and everybody's and the consensus, then how do we roll it out so people can learn, people can, and how do we help projects implement? Coming back to you, Dawn, where you had a project asking you about this, how could we as a group help projects implement this, I guess, two-sided ladder?
Well, I think that's where we would need the CNCF to do that, right? Because this little tiny meeting with a few people will not make it, right? But I think it's a little bit what we've been doing with visibility of the tag, right? The getting the word. It's trying to see if the CNCF embraces that, and then getting people to talk about it on stage, maybe a panel discussion. I don't know, and it's an ongoing thing until attitudes are very persistent and take a very long time to change. So it's so I think it's a consistent effort. I think creating it, creating the assets is the first thing, but then how do you change the attitudes, right? And that takes, that's something that we would have to work with the CNCF and kind of, because we cannot do it on our own. And I'm hoping, based on your conversations with Chris, that's something that they're interested in doing. So,
but also this.
Oops.
No, go ahead,
It's going to
Josh.
change gradually if the materials are available too, because what happens is as projects work their way through the matriculation levels, they copy and paste stuff from our examples and from our templates. And so if it's there in our templates and we have a guidance document and everything else, when they get to applying for incubating, when they get to applying for graduating, gradually projects will adopt this because they'll have pre-supplied text for it, basically. Now, in terms of actually, there's the formally adopting it, and then there's the putting it in their paperwork, and there's the actually doing anything about it. Which is sort of the second thing. And honestly, one of the things we had a volunteer to help run Maintainer Circle. We've been trying to actually restart Maintainer Circle. And if we had it actively going, that would be another potential Maintainer Circle topic, which would be better for reaching, because I'm really the people you want to reach are the maintainers.
Well,
I don't know.
go ahead. Pardon. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know if the maintainers are like the main ones we want to target, because there's the other side of the issue which is like how do we actually educate and attract non-code contributors as well, so that they come in and try and use like these guides and use everything you have in terms of material to actually go ahead and try and contribute as well. So there's the side of the educating the maintainers, and then there's also the side of actually trying to get more community involved in the non-code community involved in those efforts, and in how to attract and retain those, and build a community. So I think there's those two sides.
And just to follow up on that point, when we went to the Kubernetes community a couple months ago and said that we were going to restart the non-code effort, we got 5 responses of people that wanted to jump in and help. So I think being able to focus on that from both directions is an important point. So good on that.
Well, I've been in marketing my entire career, and CNCF marketing, we don't cold call to people to say, hey, do you want to sponsor our event, or do you want to be a member? People joined, and we saw that that exponential growth when I was there, as we talked about people who were joining and the reason they were joining and the benefits that they were getting. And that's kind of the marketing approach, communication approach I use overall. And that's one of the approaches I would suggest with this is, you talk about the success of, we interview Helm and Karen and the success they're having with their 2-prong ladder. As other projects take that and implement it, we celebrate that. And that's how awareness gets out. The old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. We can show this to a project and we can't make them implement it, but we can celebrate the ones that do, that want this. We can offer the help to help them implement that in their projects.
Yeah, and that gave me one idea, which is something that we could do, is like, if there are like any non-code contributors who are very engaged, and like just encourage them and reach out and say like, hey, why don't you submit a talk at KubeCon where you talk about how it has helped your career, what you have learned, and so on, and maybe help them or guide them a little bit with the CFP process, so that they get a chance to, so it's because that's like, as you said, like people see that and that's how they find out, right? And it's not only getting our stories out or our message, but because you were saying like highlighting others. So our role, the role of that project could be helping others, right? Like tell them and pushing them out, and maybe like having a panel discussion, submit a panel discussion with all non-code contributions, and like, like things like that, like that I think would be very helpful. It's more interesting than hearing the people who are just like doing this, the practical, like the guidance, writing it, but have not really kind of lived it themselves. So so that could be part of the awareness campaign afterwards, or even, I mean, we don't have to wait for that.
One thing I think we'll need to be a little bit careful of as we design this documentation. So I know, Kim, you've kind of talked about it as being like a two-sided ladder, but there are a lot of us who make code contributions to some projects and non-code contributions to others. And I think a lot of people kind of bridge both of those roles. So we just need to be careful that we're not putting people into buckets. You know, you're a code contribution, you're a code contributor, you're not a code contributor, because I think it's a little, there's gray areas and it's a lot more blurry than that. So I think we'll just have to be careful about how we talk about it so that we're not kind of putting people into buckets.
That's,
Excellent point. Yes.
that's something that we brought up in the non-code contributor guide that we wrote, that some of them are non-code roles, some of them are non-code contributions to primarily code roles. And something that came out of that I'd never heard other people discuss is post-code roles, where people have to do non-code work, but they have to already have code experience within that particular code base in order to do a particular non-code role within that project. So anyway, I'm rambling, but I'm giving you a thumbs up.
Very good point, Noah. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got like lots of, it was lots of great feedback and discussion. So I think, Kim, you got a big thumbs up, I think, from the team. So let's do this. And as I mentioned, like I'll collaborate. I'll volunteer to collaborate with you on that, because like I'm passionate about that as well. So very excited.
Thank you. And I think our next steps so is the approval, and then I would love some guidance from you all, because this is my, I know you come from CNCF and I have no idea how the tags and working groups work. No judgment, please. But yeah, like what would be, what is the process? I mean, I can go do a bunch of research. I can make a bunch of recommendations. I think there should be meetings, probably. I mean, how would you all recommend actually implementing this within how this team likes to work?
I would start by creating an issue and outlining all of the things that you plan to do. And that gives us kind of a jumping off point for people to start reviewing sort of your plans, and then you can link all the documents that you're working on within that issue as well. So I would say, honestly, like there's enough interest in this that I would just sort of get started on it. But I would use an issue as a jumping off point for a lot of that work. And then I would use, as you're starting to make progress on some of these documents or some of the plans and some of your thoughts, I would use the Slack channel and the meetings to get feedback.
Okay. And where is there a certain, oh God, whatever you call it within GitHub, where that issue should be opened?
Yeah, you can just do it in the tag contributor strategy.
Just overall, there's no subfolder. Okay.
No, yeah, just create an issue in the main repo. That should be fine.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, if you go to the issues tab and just click on like the new issue button, and then you're good to go.
Perfect. Thank you for the link. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Mentoring working group. Do we have, and nothing is in here, but do we have anything that we wanted to report on? No? Okay.
Yeah, they completed the LFX term. We've got a bunch of stats from the last TOC meeting, and we'll have a mentoring meeting on Tuesday for anybody interested in that. And that'll be actually this tag's last meeting of the year. So.
Okay, awesome. And contributor growth. I don't think Carolyn's here, but I guess there's no one who wants to say something. Just starting next year again, I guess. And then governance, Josh, again.
Yeah, well, me and Dawn. The
Sorry. I don't know why I think like governance is, I think you're always talking about it. That's probably,
Yeah.
sorry, Josh and Don.
Yeah, well, I'll do the first item, and because I did it. Yeah, so honestly, because of a request from a project, I updated I put in a PR to update the maintainer council template, and that updates in two ways. One is it updates for having full template documentation, and the second way that it updates it is to add a few things that we realized are actually missing from the maintainer council template, like actual sort of reasons a maintainer might be removed, for example. And that is tied to another PR that actually has the full template documentation. So you need to look at both PRs, which are linked to each other, but in different repos. Carolyn has already provided a bunch of feedback, but feedback and review from other people is welcome, particularly because a lot of people in this call probably have never looked at the original template.
I'll review that tomorrow before I go on holiday
Yeah.
for the rest of the year.
So, Don, do you want me to do the rest of the stuff? Do you want to do the rest of the stuff?
No, go for it. I
Okay.
typed some notes in, but you're on a
Okay.
roll, so go.
Okay. We also something that we've discussed before. We went ahead and proposed to the TOC that starting next year, an actual sort of formal review of project governance be part of the graduation process for projects moving to graduating. And frankly, part of the reason we propose that is that Dawn and I are being informally asked to do that anyway. And if we're going to be doing it, it ought to be part of the official process. And bluntly, out of like the 4 or 5 projects that we've done that for in the last quarter or so, all but one of them needed substantial changes to governance documentation. So so yeah, we propose that. Given the TOC, likely it won't actually get voted on until late January, but we need to get the ball rolling sometime. And then we were talking about, and this was general tags. This is a general tag conversation. We were talking about where to promote the tag for the awareness effort. Now that Twitter is imploding, because Twitter's been the social media used by the CNCF largely, and that's no longer a good way to reach our target audience. We talked about a couple of alternatives, like potentially, and this would be a question for the tag, whether or not we want to wait for the CNCF to have an official Mastodon server in order to create an account on Mastodon, or whether we want to create an account now on a server like Hatchigerm, and then move it once there's an official CNCF server.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I mean, like OpenFlametry has already opened up an account on Fostodon. Austin Parker did that. I created a Fostodon account for Ambassador Labs because we're gonna put Emissary and Telepresence under that now. And then if CNCF one came, we'd migrate. But it just feels like the issue on the CNCF Foundation repo for creating a Mastodon server is has languished. I think the last post in it was from DIMS like 23 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's waiting on staffing, so it might be a
totally.
while.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think especially given, you know, like if anyone's been following what Chris Nova's been going through on Hackaderm in terms of like Austin Parker originally posted that issue and was like, it seems like it's going to be a really small investment, and now, you know, it's like on Hackaderm, because I'm on Hackaderm for my personal account, and you know, they're recruiting mods and they're recruiting infrastructure engineers and, you know, to help out with it, because it turns out it's harder than it looks initially. So
yeah, well, the CNCF could limit the scope, but right now, I mean, but somebody needs to be staffed to be moderator and admin of it, and nobody is currently.
Yeah.
So we don't know how long
exactly.
So yeah, so I mean the question is, so you would be a vote in favor of let's go ahead and create an account on some server that already has a whole bunch of cloud native people now.
Yeah,
And
Fossidon
then
or
just move them
Hackaderm would
later
seem
on.
like good candidates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think Chris specifically said that, like, I'll have to look for the documentation, but like, I don't think Chris wanted like CNCF stuff on Hackaderm, from my understanding. Yeah.
I think you and I were in a conversation with her or on there on a thread, and she said it was fine if we put CNCF their stuff there
Yeah,
specifically
that was
for
a
now.
while
If
back.
it was
I
gonna,
think since then,
has it changed?
like, I
Okay.
think it's like written in a doc. Yeah, let me find it. I'll link it here, but I
Well-
just like mentally, I don't know if we should like expect that would be a place we can do it, as in maybe like Foss Social or any of the other ones might be a better option in the meantime. Just because it was like written down, I'm not so sure that we should do it.
I
There
think
are
there's a simple way to
additional
get an
rules.
answer to this.
There are additional rules for project and brand style accounts
Yeah.
over on Hackaderm.
I was gonna say, I know that there's extra requirements for corporate accounts, but the corporate one specifically calls out like if you are making a profit, you should consider yourself bound by this. I don't know if anyways, like I said, like yeah, I mean, open telemetry went to Fossidon, so there's other options too.
Yeah, it's okay. The second social media thing that brought up, Victor Liu actually joined the call, who's a new contributor to this tag. And he has a lot of experience with LinkedIn. And so he's now investigating what we could do in LinkedIn. Because he runs some LinkedIn groups for other projects and has found it a useful atmosphere, mostly for reaching beginners. So this would be falling more under for example, mentorship, like targeting mentees, etc., than reaching, say, maintainers or our corporate audience or anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of reaching the non-code contributors as well. I see a lot of people there that that might like join some group and start some conversation around that as well. I've been following like the LinkedIn growth for a while, and it does seem a good place to do some stuff and get some attention and whatnot. And they are investing in some events and whatnot, features that are they seem to be good. Maybe we can do something around the events there as well, some in the future.
Yeah, well, so Victor's going to poke around and report back with some ideas on how we could use LinkedIn.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty simple. I've been playing with social media, multiple different tools. So when it comes to CNCF, I'm actually pretty surprised there's no like official CNCF related groups. So I think that's the opportunity. So if one of the co-chair for this tag want to create a group, I can start promoting it. So what happened is when you create a LinkedIn group, you can make like a manager. It's like so there can be multiple managers to help promote the group. What happened on LinkedIn is not only for beginners, mentees. It could be really for very experienced people who could be interested in contributing to CNCF projects. I just doesn't know how. One thing I observed using the different multimedia, including Twitter, is you're really under the mercy of the algorithm to the Twitter, for example, to decide who you can actually reach, right? Because unless you're really famous, there's no sure thing how many people can be following your message on Twitter. Whereas for LinkedIn, there are many things so-called groups. So it's basically a multicast group, right? So once you're in there, as long as that group allow you to post a message, you could be posting a message that can be seen right away by 500,000 people right away. Their group as big as that. So that's why I think it's definitely worth. So first thing I would say is create an official group. For example, CNCF, contribute tag group, official group, and then let's just start really sending messages in multiple different ways. And there should be. The good thing about that is once you have a group, you can send follow-up messages, and those people will watch every single message.
So this has definitely been a big topic right now. Like, how are we going to reach our audience? How are we going to reach the people who we think want to find our information in light of that Twitter is not around? And I've started doing some research and haven't finished the blog. And frankly, Twitter, as you mentioned, I believe that was Victor talking with the algorithm, your chance of your tweet actually being seen by the people who want to see it, who you want to see it, is rather low. So I've been doing some research and there's been a couple talks. I'm really curious about LinkedIn groups because they definitely went by the wayside recently, but I'm really curious now. I'm going to do some research. Is that going to pick up in importance now that people are not going to Twitter to find the information that they're looking for? Maddie Stratton and Jeremy Heiss and a couple others did a great kind of podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned like Twitch and YouTube Live, but so there's a lot. We're looking at a lot of options as marketers. So I'll be happy to share my research. And now that I have lots of free time, I'll be happy to share my research once I finish it up.
Yeah,
I said there is not an answer right now. It's really ambiguous. There's not an answer.
Yeah, there are multiple ways to reach the audience. I think for most media, including if you create a YouTube channel, unless they are like 1 million followers, you will only have those people who really at the mercy of the algorithm. With LinkedIn groups, you're basically you're sending the message directly to the whole group. There's no algorithm between you and the audience.
So I think we can have a long discussion about this, hashing it out. We're almost at the end of the meeting, so I actually wanted to get some decisions from the tag. One is, should we go ahead and create a tag contributor strategy account on some appropriate Mastodon server right now?
I think why not? I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work, and
Okay.
then it's like, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should.
And you can
agree.
redirect. You can redirect to another server really easily.
Yeah.
Once.
And then the second thing is, should we go ahead and create a LinkedIn group right now?
My question,
Called something like contributing to the CNCF, I guess.
Yeah. So because I was listening to all of this, and I don't know, I joined the DevOps group like years ago, I don't know, and because I was like, oh, Kubernetes and blah blah, people seemed relevant, like it was totally dead. So it's like there are a lot of people in there, so I'm just wondering how, do we see those being successful? And then would it make sense for the tech? Because I feel like if the CNCF had a group, it would get much more traction. And then the question is I'm not too familiar with Linkerd groups, but can you have within a group have different topics of this? Because it would be ideal if there would be the CNCF would be the home, and then there would be a place. I think it's all one feed, right? It's not.
So I think so that we have time to talk about Maintainer Circle. Maybe we can ask Victor and Catherine and Kim to take this offline and maybe start a discussion in Slack about this, and then come back in a new meeting at the new year with some concrete ideas for how this might really work best.
Yeah, because Dave is interested in helping with the Maintainer Circle, I see here. So.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, this can be very brief. Just Josh and I talked about this at the last one of these, and I was just and then Thanksgiving happened, and now the end of the year holidays are gonna happen. So this is more just like a little, hey, by the way, I can still help with this. And we should connect.
What
Yeah, and
support do you need from us to make that happen?
I really just, there was a brief discussion last time about what it involved. And so I think it's really just about how do I get started? Are there any formal things I need to follow or anything like that? Or is it just doing it?
Yeah. I'm going to say at this point right now is we need to work with Dave to figure out a topic and facilitators and maybe schedule something for, mid to late January. For an online maintainer circle. And then make sure that Dave is connected with all of the notification channels that we have to let people know about it. I don't know if you already had ideas for a topic, Dave, after our conversation.
No, but I can come up with one. I will,
Okay.
and honestly, after today, I thought an interesting thing might also be to try to pursue like a maintainer circle that is oriented at non-code maintainers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing we've struggled with is just coming up with topics and speakers and getting them scheduled. So I think if we can overcome that hurdle, I think that will be put us in a good position to get one done in January, February.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
and in the process, we'll improve the MC documentation, because what we have currently is kind of Paris's troubleshooting list, which doesn't cover the, hey, I'm starting this from scratch. So we need that still.
Yeah.
Sure. And I can help with that. And then, I think, so it's like, I can take the action item of coming up with a topic, trying to find someone to talk about it. And then, I think, where would I, just in the Slack or something, because my next question would be, where would I post that? That's not this meeting. So, okay, cool.
Okay, then real quick, the getting the word out campaign. So we are working on a blog, and probably hopefully that's an opportunity to highlight the tag as well, and then maybe like a PR push if there is an interest on the CNCF. And then weekly tweet. I don't know. Have we been doing this lately?
We haven't, because of the Twitter situation, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
but
as soon as
whatever.
we have
yeah, right.
As soon as we have, as soon as we have our own, Mastodon account, then it becomes really vital that we actually do have our weekly, if not more frequent, thing. So we'll want to restart that. Probably for the new year. One other quick thing for anybody who's still on here for the survey is I have all of the survey data loaded in the database right now. I can't provide general access to the tag because I have not cleaned it of personally identifying information. For people seeing the survey questions and that sort of thing, if you have combinations of questions that you would like to see the breakout from, I can generate those. Right now, I'm just sort of poking around to see where our sort of interesting combinations are. To say, hey, let's, take our persona establishing questions and see if we can actually come up with some coherent persona stuff, and see other things. And if people are not having a good time with contributing, where are they not having a good time, and those sorts of things. But suggestions for other things that might be interesting combinations to look at are very welcome, because we have 20 questions, several of which have multiple options. I don't necessarily know what to, to try.
I'll reach out and see if I have any suggestions to try out and see if you can get some insights there.
Sounds good. Okay, we're 2 minutes over. Lots of good conversations. Okay, I think thanks everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks everybody.
See ya.